We'll have the 5-minute intermission. Now we're ready to come back again. And for those of you that got ice cream, yay. You can have a little bit more ice cream. So I'm real pleased to have the opportunity to introduce our next governor of the state of Minnesota after he gets done with his photo opportunity. Come on over here, Dr. Jensen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for coming.
It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. Folks, Marla Helseth is part of the electricity that's going on across the state of Minnesota, and you can feel it. And we are so fortunate to have Marla here saying, listen, I'm going to stand up for the conservative convictions. I'm going to raise the banner. We know that public safety, school choice, the inflation, the economy, these are the big deals. But it's more than that. We've got to have candidates that are on fire. And you can't wear a dress like that and not be on fire. Now, I got to tell you, I'm just a little colorblind, so I don't see colors really as well as some people do. That's why you'll see me dressing fairly, if you will, safe colors. But that dress is beautiful. It is. So here's why we're here, folks. We all recognize that we've got to unite. This is no time for us to stand on the sidelines. We remember the words from more than 100 years ago from Teddy Roosevelt. He said, we got to get out of the cheap seats and we got to get into the arena. That means you've got to be willing to get bruised and bloodied right alongside of us. There's no question. I see Julia here. I see Marla here. I see other candidates. Robert, you're here. Other candidates here. Ryan's here. I mean, frankly, folks, we need you there with us side by side because we're going to take some slings and arrows. We can't not, because you know as well as I do that there is a new normal emerging. And that's why we're so compelled to be here, is because we're seeing things that we just couldn't imagine. Let's just ask ourselves this one. What did Duluth do last Monday? They hired another prosecuting attorney. They know there's a problem. What is Tim Walz telling us? He's saying, gee, the winds of politics are telling me I better get tough on crime. So he says, let's have a special session and do something for public safety. He's not had any interest at all. We're seeing in the schools, we're seeing an absolute departure from a foundational education for kids. And we're seeing, we're going to teach these kids critical race theory. We're going to teach them that what they accomplish, what they do, doesn't matter. It wasn't because of what their efforts were. It was because of the color of their skin. We have abbreviations, ESG scores, DEI things. I mean, it makes our head spin. And so we're saying we've got to be a part of what is this new normal going to look like. If you go back to the word conservative, that word comes from Latin, conservare, and it means to safeguard. That's what we're standing for. Is the Republican Party right on all the things? No. We need a makeover. We need to do some things better. But we know that the conservative principles that we elevate are what have to prevail. And the things we safeguard are faith and family and freedom and the founding fathers' wisdom and less government. Those are the things we stand for. We stand for life. We stand for life not just at the beginning, but we stand for it at the end. That's why we are so horrified by what happened over the last 2.5 years when we saw so many frail elderly people having to die alone in nursing homes after Governor Walz's policies, as well as Governor Cuomo's policies in New York, literally pipelined active COVID disease into the nursing homes. And once that happened, was there any humane effort at all to help these folks? No. They were locked in and families were locked out. I remember Eric Paulson calling me, and he was just devastated because his dad died. His dad died unattended. Eric wasn't able to get there. He wasn't able to hold his hand. He wasn't able to preserve his dignity, make sure he wasn't air hungry, make sure that he wasn't lying in his own urine. He couldn't get to him. Behind a pane of glass, he watched his dad die. We saw that happen, so many of us. This is a legacy that we will hold from this COVID-19 pandemic. This is the new normal that we object to, and we're not going to allow it to continue. We're not going to allow it to continue. At the end of the day, you can talk about public safety, you can talk about school choice, and you can talk about the fact that I have patients in my office crying because they don't know if they should spend their last $100 on groceries for the family or filling up their gas tank. We know those are the issues. We know that if you have inflation of 9.1% and you're getting one of the biggest raises you've gotten in years, you get a 6% raise and you're losing ground, we know that I don't care what Governor Walz says about the unemployment rate, the economy isn't okay. And the reason the unemployment rate's so low is we have had so many people between 60 and 80 say, I'm checking out. I was willing to be a part of the workforce. I was willing to help out, but I'm done. I have seen what you have done to me. If you look at the number of Minnesotans that are working right now and compare it to pre-COVID, we're not back to pre-COVID levels. That's why you've got unemployment rates so low. It's a fictitious metric that people will use and say the economy's okay. The economy is not okay. It's going to get worse, and if you think it's okay, you must be on the Democratic side of the aisle because you got your head in the sand. It's that simple. So what we're going to do this time around is we're going to see a leadership contrast. You're going to see someone like Marla Helseth, and you're going to see someone stand up and speak truth to power, even if it gets her in trouble. And if she doesn't know how to get in trouble by speaking truth to power, call me. I can help you with that. But we're also going to see a resistance to groupthink. We are not going to fall into groupthink. As conservatives, we have got to raise the banner and say, listen, folks, we need you by us. We need you to tell us when we have a good idea and when we have a bad idea. Because quite frankly, I make mistakes every day. I have gone into my office and told my staff, hey, I came up with a brainstorm, let's do this. And by the time the day's over, I realized that it was one of the most numbskull ideas I'd come up with in a week. But I'll tell you what's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to stop taxing Social Security twice. We should not be doing that, but we should push it. We should push the conversation and say, okay, we got a $10 to $12 billion overpayment. What about using now as the time to talk about what would Minnesota look like if we had no personal income tax? What kind of an economic hub could we be? If we could bring Fortune 500 companies to Minnesota instead of having them exit, what would that do? The last time we had a Fortune 500 company come to Minnesota was 2004 Mosaic, and they have since left. We have not had a Fortune 500 company come to Minnesota in 18 years. We have got to ask ourselves, if we would pare down our spending, if we would become the sizzling economic hub of the Midwest, could we get to a point through a phased-in process where we would no longer have a personal income tax? That's the kind of leadership you're going to get from Ryan, from Julia, from Bob, from Marla. We're going to also stand up, and we're not going to flinch because you're going to be at our side. You're going to stand there and say, Doc, you don't need to flinch. You don't have to back down because we're right there in the arena with you, side by side. And folks, we will speak for all voices. I remember Hubert Humphrey saying it in the 50s, where he said, we need to speak for those at the beginning of the life, for those at the end of lives, and we need to speak for those who live in the shadows of life. And that's what we need to do. I know that the country may not have had the robust conversation that we need to have, but Julia Coleman has been leading the charge and saying, what would some sort of paid family leave support or paid maternity leave look like? We have got to lead that conversation. We can no longer afford to be the party of not talking about the hard ideas. When I talk to millennials and Gen Zs, they ask me, what does corporate responsibility look like when Pfizer makes 50% of its gross revenues from one product for which it has no liability? What does it look like to be corporately responsible? What does consumer protection look like if Pfizer isn't going to take responsibility and you'd get harmed by taking a product of theirs? What does that look like? What is the Republican plan for conservation and protection of our resources and protection of our water look like? Folks, we can and must lead on these issues. We cannot shove them to the side. We will lead on the big issues, but we will have the conversations on all the issues. And if you want to contrast that kind of leadership to Tim Walz, you know what he does. You saw him freeze. He does it over and over again. And I think we can cut him slack if you freeze once. But I spent the afternoon today on Lake Street, touring the 3rd Precinct, looking at the devastated grounds, looking at the buildings that have been replaced, looking at the sand lots that have just broken down bricks. And I asked myself, did Governor Walz ever say, folks, this is on me? I'm sorry? Did he ever tell us that, if my daughter is tweeting the position of the National Guard, she shouldn't have been doing that? I never heard that. Folks, if you're apologetic for something, generally there's some level of remorse. You say, I could have done better. That's on me. But he froze when it came to the 3rd Precinct. And he froze when it came to having the National Guard on the street. And that's why we had journalists on TV saying, Where is our governor? And he froze 2 weeks later when he said to the State Patrol, stand down. If the demonstrators want to tear down the Christopher Columbus statue, let them. And then a few weeks ago, even knowing that the 4th of July could be problematic for Minneapolis, Jacob Fry knew it. Tim Walz did nothing to prepare. And at the end of the day, isn't it his job to prepare and protect and preserve? And do you feel like that's happening? That's what this campaign is going to be all about, the sharp contrast in leadership. And Minnesotans are electrified saying, this is not okay. This is not okay where we're at. So here we stand. We know that we have to unleash the energies of all Minnesotans. We have to have a big tent out there. Marla's going to help us build a big tent out there. Her voice is going to be unique and exceptional, and it's going to be different than Scott Jensen's. But we're going to stand for the same darn conservative principles that give us our moral compass. And that's what we need at the end of the day more than anything. You need to know, what is your moral compass? And your moral compass is driven by your convictions. And your convictions are driven by the consistency of action. And that's what we're going to be about. Marla, I celebrate your candidacy. I'm so excited for you. So in closing, I just want to say this, folks. Over the last 2.5 years, all of us have suffered some pretty strong heartbreak watching people's lives turned upside down. We've seen the suicides. We've seen the sorrowful deaths. We've seen the suicidal ideation. We have seen the Gen Zs and the millennials. We've seen their lives turned upside down. We've seen their last junior and senior years in high school turned upside down. We've denied them so much. We've seen the policies of locking in, locking down, and locking out fail over and over again. And we have had a governor that continuously holds up his finger to see which way are the political winds blowing. That's going to stop. We are taking the fight to Tim Walz. And with people like Marla, we're not just going to take the fight to him. We're going to beat him. We're going to hold him accountable. We are going to win. And when we do, we're going to heal Minnesota. And we're never going to look back. Folks, let's celebrate Marla Helsa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We've got one more speaker, and that is Secretary of State. Kim Crockett is here. Come on down, Kim.
I like the sound of that. Well, I think I'm the candidate for Secretary of State. Hey, good afternoon. I know we've all probably had a long day, so I will try to keep this brief. One of the things I've learned along the trail, and I've seen many of you along that way, it's great to see you again this afternoon. People don't know what the Secretary of State's office does. And maybe most of us do, but let's review it. We've been going around asking people, what do you think the Secretary of State does? And old, young, everything in between. We've gotten lots of different answers, and Dr. Jensen has to hear this again today. A number of people have said, well, maybe Kim's running to be Dr. Jensen's secretary. And anybody who knows me goes, that's not going to work out very well. So we need to educate, don't we, along the way. Everybody knows what an attorney general does, right? It sounds important. You know, and a state auditor, well, you can figure that out. They must audit something, right? So the Secretary of State, the two big things, right? Business services, especially for small businesses, right? And the other is elections and the security of our elections, which I think is the most consequential of the two. So let's start with business. I just spent the afternoon out at Wright County, and there were a lot of small businesses there. And I was in Mound this morning at the parade, Spirit of the Lakes parade, with a lot of small businesses in line. Well, the people who locked down Minnesota are asking us to vote for them. The people who took away our jobs, our right to go to church, our right to shop where we needed to, and the right of our children to go to school, right? They're asking us to send them back, to re-elect them so they can keep their jobs. Boo! Boo! No. We have to remind Minnesota, as Dr. Jensen just did so well, what we have been through. Because it's kind of like a Minnesota winter. We're very good here at forgetting really painful, long things. And we deal with stuff, right? We're trained to do that here in Minnesota, and people are putting it behind them. Well, we can't let them do that. So the second thing is elections and the integrity of our elections. And folks, that's why I'm running. I saw what was coming in 2020. As you know, many of you who know me tried to warn Minnesota. And it happened. And you look at it and you think, well, I can either live in a state where I'm not sure my vote counts, or I can get out of the policy arena into the political arena and fight for you. So let's review quickly. So again, when people say, well, why is Kim running and why is that important? In 2020, our current Secretary of State made a deal. He cut a deal with a really bad guy who's been messing with our elections since 2008, and his name is Mark Elias, E-L-I-A-S, with the Democracy Docket. They cut a deal in Ramsey County Court. So you have a DNC lawyer coming into Minnesota trying to change our election laws under the cover of COVID, working with a friendly Secretary of State, and frankly, a friendly Attorney General's office. And they go into Ramsey County Court, they extend the election for a week, and they waive 2 critical protections for our absentee balloting. Postmarks. Didn't need a postmark. Could come in after November 3rd for a week, and then the witness signature. Doesn't that sound like a legislative action? And he had already tried to get those from the state legislature, and they said, no, go away, Steve. So he cuts a deal in Ramsey County Court. And you've heard the story probably before. Sarah Gruing was the Ramsey County judge. Amy Klobuchar's former state political director. So you got a DNC activist, Hillary Clinton's lawyer, Mark Elias, cutting a deal with Steve Simon, and Ellison behind that too, with Klobuchar's former state political director on the bench. Now, does that stink or what? So he was making legislation. He's an executive officer, constitutional officer. He doesn't have the right to do that, folks. So he violated the Constitution, and that's not me saying that, that's the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals that said that. He also invited Mark Zuckerberg into our state to spend $7 million, 7 million Zuckerbucks, to get out the vote for his party to keep him in power and to change the outcome of the vote, right? By getting out the vote in Democrat areas. He also has been excluding citizens from the absentee ballot boards, both Democrats and Republicans, right? Where we have a tradition of helping one another to keep the vote honest. Well, he's been excluding us from those ballot boards. And anyone who knows me knows I like to say, what was the percentage of the vote in 2020 that was by absentee? 58%. 6 out of 10 votes in Minnesota were absentee in 2020. Can you help me drive that percentage down this year by voting in person? Let's return to the civic traditions that unite us by voting in person, either at City Hall. You got a whole week before Election Day to do it, for both the primary, which is coming up on August 9th, and then the general election. So can we join together to begin a shift in culture away from insecure, chaotic, expensive absentee balloting and go back to voting together as neighbors? And tell our cities and our counties that that's what we want. So I do something along the parade route. This has been a big hit, folks. Oh, it's the wrong sign, Marty. I pulled the wrong sign out of the car. Yeah, thank you, Robert. It's the wrong sign. Well, I'm tired. He's gonna go get it for me. Sorry, darling. It's still a good message. It's, right. Well, okay, I've got 2 signs, I call them my parade signs, and I'm sending them to every congressional district, several sets. This is part of what I'm trying to do, is reinforce that there's still an election day, folks. We have a primary, it's a really important one. Thank you, Martin. Look at that. Thank you, Marty. Hey, I could not be doing this without his help. So this one's not very popular, but I'm the Secretary of State candidate, so I want to educate and remind people of what the dates are. So we make sure endorsed candidates like Jim Schultz win the primary. And then this is the other one. So I'm walking along parade routes carrying this sign, and people literally get out of their seats to say, you go, you get that done. We need that in Minnesota. So this is a popular message. So to wrap it up, I don't know what the margin of fraud is that we need to overcome in Minnesota. It's real. I don't know if it's this big or this big, but what I know when I campaign all over this state is that people are engaged. They've been engaged already all summer long. Republicans are ready to vote. And what I say to them is, you gotta bring everybody out. No excuses this year. And talk to people who may not normally vote Republican and ask them to vote with us. Give us a chance. Introduce them to Dr. Jensen and to Jim Schultz and Ryan Wilson. And Matt Burke, yeah, too, I guess. And I tell people, we are the A-team, folks. The convention picked the A-team, and we're out here working hard for you. And I believe with all my heart that the window is, it's this big, right? But we can get through it if we all do it together. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Marla, and I was going to say, we can't fix any of the problems. We can't get photo ID unless Marla's in the Senate in a majority, and we have the House back in a majority there. That's how we have, and that's why I'm here, because it matters that she gets elected. Thanks, Marla.
Thank you so much, Kim. So I just had the next governor of the state of Minnesota ask me if he could say a few more words. So what kind of an MC would I be if I didn't say yes?
I want 1 minute for each of the state candidates. I'm going to start with Ryan Wilson. I want you to remember this going forward today. The reason we need Ryan Wilson is when you look at a state auditor, what you're looking for is you're looking for audits. And the reason you're looking for audits is because you want accountability. And you know why you want accountability is because we have seen transgressions occur that should never have occurred. And if we walk away from what's happened over the last 4 years, we have made a terrible mistake. So we need Ryan Wilson, a bright, smart guy who is not afraid to audit, hold people accountable, and make sure that we never do this again. Ryan, raise your hand. We got to vote you in. And then we get to Kim Crockett. And let me tell you, Kim Crockett is not auditioning to be my secretary. Arguably, if you want to talk about Kim Crockett to people, you talk about three things. You talk about past, present, future. Kim Crockett has taken upon herself to be one of the most educated people in the entire state on election integrity. That's her past. She has gone out and she has gotten the information she needs. She can speak to every issue. And when it comes to the present, when she tells you that Steve Simon milked as much as he could from the legislature in 2020, he did. And we came up with a compromise agreement and we were done. But as soon as we went out of session, he did an end run. He went to the courts to squeeze out a little bit more. That's what he did. And Kim Crockett can speak to that story. And as to the future, if we can't restore the faith and integrity in our elections, America will no longer be the country it's been before. So we need Kim Crockett because of her past. She's smart as a whip. She knows the present story. She can explain it. She can expose Steve Simon. And for the future, she is probably the one person who can restore our election integrity. And then we turn to Jim Schultz. If you look at Jim Schultz, and you look at the three characters in The Wizard of Oz, you first think of the lion. The lion, what did he need? He needed courage. Jim Schultz has run a tough campaign from the very beginning. Jim Schultz has demonstrated courage from day one, and he has never flinched. And then we go, you remember who we do it next? It's the Tin Man. And the Tin Man had a heart. I am absolutely confident that Jim Schultz, as the Attorney General, will be both strong, enforcing, preparing, protecting, preserving, and he will have a heart because he understands the plight of all Minnesotans. And lastly, we get to the Scarecrow. And when it comes to brains, you will be hard-pressed to find anybody running in this campaign cycle that's smarter than Jim Schultz. So with Jim Schultz, I am unabashedly supporting him. I want him at my side, and that's why I'll be voting for Jim. And actually, I already have for the primary. Jim Schultz, we're going to win with you. So folks, thank you for letting me speak to those issues.
Thank you so much. So for those of you that got the invitation, what time did it tell you that this event was going to be over? 8. That's right. So actually, it's going to be over at 7 o'clock as far as our speakers are concerned. So what's one of the nice things about the Republicans? Take a look at your watch. What time is it? 6:58. On time. Exactly what they're supposed to be. And these are politicians. Are you kidding me? One last thing. Campaigns cost a lot of money, like I told you at the very beginning. If you haven't contributed your $50, you're a fool. Go on back and give those people $50 and you get it back in the mail. Or $100 if you're married, you get it back in the mail. Thank you all for coming, and we're going to be hanging out here. I think a lot of the candidates will be hanging out, so if you want to have some one-on-one, have some one-on-one.